Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to speak to you today about the tragedy of Europe. If Europe were once united in the sharing of its common inheritance, there would be no limit to the happiness, to the prosperity and the glory which its 300 or 400 million people would enjoy. Yet it is from Europe that have sprung that series of frightful nationalistic quarrels which we have seen in this 20th century and even in our own lifetime wreck the peace and mar the prospects of all mankind. Indeed, but for the fact that the great republic across the Atlantic Ocean realized that the ruin or enslavement of Europe would involve their own fate as well, but for that, the Dark Ages would have returned in all their cruelty and squalor. Gentlemen, they may still return. Yet all the while, there is a remedy which, if it were generally and spontaneously adopted, would as if by a miracle transform the whole scene. It is to recreate the European family and to provide it with a structure under which it can dwell in peace, in safety, and in freedom. We must build a kind of United States of Europe. In this way only will hundreds of millions of toilers be able to regain the simple joys and hopes which make life worth living. The process is simple. All that is needed is the resolve of hundreds of millions of men and women. The League of Nations did not fail because of its principles or conceptions. It failed because these principles were deserted by those states who had brought it into being. This disaster must not be repeated. I was very glad to read in the newspapers 2 days ago that my friend President Truman had expressed his interest and sympathy with this great design. Why should there not be an European group which could give a sense of enlarged patriotism and common citizenship to the distracted peoples of this turbulent and mighty continent? We all know that the 2 world wars through which we have passed, crimes and massacres have been committed for which there is no parallel since the invasion of the Mongols in the 14th century. We must all turn our backs upon the horrors of the past. We must look to the future. We cannot afford to drag forward across the years that are to come the hatreds and revenges which have sprung from the injuries of the past. If Europe is to be saved from infinite misery and indeed from final doom, there must be this act of faith in the European family. It's the only lesson of history to be that mankind is unteachable. The peoples have only to will it. The structure of the United States of Europe, if well and truly built, will be such as to make the material strength of a single state less important. Small nations will count as much as large ones and gain their honor by their contribution to the common cause. But I must give you a warning. Time may be short. The cannons have ceased firing. The fighting has stopped, but the dangers have not stopped. If we are to form the United States of Europe, or whatever name it may take. We must begin now. The atomic bomb is still only in the hands of a state and nation which we know will never use it except in the cause of right and freedom. But it may well be that in a few years this awful agency of destruction will be widespread, and the catastrophe following from its use by several warring nations will not only bring to an end all that we call civilization, but may possibly disintegrate the globe itself. We must recreate the European family in a regional structure, called, it may be, the United States of Europe. And the first practical step would be to form a Council of Europe. If at first all the states of Europe are not willing or able to join the Union, we must nevertheless proceed to assemble and combine those who will and those who can. The salvation of the common people of every race and of every land from war or servitude must be established on solid foundations and must be guarded by the readiness of all men and women to die rather than submit to tyranny. And therefore I say to you, let Europe arise.